And to rejoice again. And to rejoice again. Today we are joyful then. And to rejoice again. Hoo-yah!
Good morning and welcome. Come into the center. Come in from the margins. I will hold you here. Don't look back or around. Feel my arms. The water is rising. I will hold you as you tremble. I will warm you. Don't look out or away. Life is in here, between you and me. In this tiny space where I end and you begin, hope lives. In this precious tiny space, no words need to be whispered to tell us we are one. You and I, we make the circle, if we choose to. Come, move in. I am waiting for you. Let us be gathered. It is good to be with one another.
The chalice is a symbol of our UU faith. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, it is time now to light it together as we say the same words we say each week at our fellowship. We light this flame as a symbol of new life enlightening our way, as a symbol of the warmth in every human heart. Let the lightning of this flame rekindle in us the inner light of hope, of peace, of love. May we share that light with all people.
Good morning. I am Marie Luna, your Director of Congregational Life. Thank you for welcoming us into your home today. It is good to be together, even we have to be physically apart. If you are joining us from another Unitarian Universalist congregation, we warmly welcome you. If this is your first time visiting the fellowship, I want to extend you a special welcome. I encourage you to reach out to find more about our fellowship. I would be happy to help you get connected here. Please send me an email. I will put my email address in the chat box. Today's service is being led and supported by Reverend Leah Ongiri, our Associate Minister, Allie Peters, our Intern Minister, Dana Johnson, who is the Chair of our Care Team, Kim Hartman, our Director of Religious Education, Steve Seek, our Music Director, our wonderful musicians and singers, and Adam Robinson, our AV Tech, who is supporting all of our technology from his home. Thank you to everyone who has made this service possible. This year, we are focusing on growing resilience. We are digging in to what it means to grow ourselves and our community to be sources of life, even when things get tough. Right now, we are in the weeks of our theme, A Community of Embrace. Thank you to everyone for joining us as we practice what it means to embrace each other and our wider world, to hold each other, even from a distance. We are so glad you're here. I invite you now to settle in to your space, wherever you are, setting aside your week in whatever way you're able, so that we can be together fully, even from afar.
May we be filled Good morning. Each of us, no matter our age or stage in life, is on a journey. Our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles call us to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And so we take time each week when we gather to hear stories and explore ideas in new ways. There is a word, Ubuntu, which comes from the Bantu languages of Southern Africa. It's kind of hard to translate into English, but it means something like, I am because you are. Ubuntu is a way of looking at the world that emphasizes the link between the individual and the collective group. And it says that we can't exist as human beings alone, that we are all interconnected, and each of us plays a role in the well-being of one another. So in some South African villages, when greeting someone, rather than asking, "How are you?" one asks, "How are we?" Today we have parts of a longer story called Zandi Finds Ubuntu, and it's a story about a little girl, Zandi, who is growing up on the savannas of Zimbabwe in Africa, and who notices how animal communities show character traits that are similar to those seen in people. So here's our story. It was another bright and sunny day on the savannah, and Zandi was daydreaming under the shade of a majestic baobab tree. The savannah was bursting with activity. Some of it could be seen, and some could only be heard. Zandi gazed up at the huge baobab tree and watched all of the different life that was unfolding within its umbrella-like branches. There was a family of monkeys who were grooming one another under the watchful eye of a little shy chameleon. There was a trail of black ants marching up the enormous tree trunk. There was a beautiful green snake clinging to a branch who was waiting for its dinner to pass by. And there were colorful birds who gathered on the canopy and who squawked loudly to one another. The baobab tree was a friend to all, and it opened its many arms to the creatures of the savannah. Sandy looked up and thanked the baobab tree for befriending her too, and allowing her to enjoy the cool ground beneath the spreading tree. She gathered up her chumboko, snapped it in the air to awaken her sleepy cattle, and they all headed for home. On her way, Zandi spotted a herd of striped zebra who were grazing peacefully with their companions, the mighty wildebeest. She watched as they mingled together, and she noticed how they protected one another from the ferocious animals of the savannah. Without each other, the zebras and the wildebeest would be prey. They would be prey to the lions and the leopards and the cheetahs. And the friendship that they shared reminded Zandi of her own village. Next, Zandi came across a long trail of big red ants moving a gigantic object across the grassland. Carefully, she knelt down and she looked closely at the procession. The big object was a dead grasshopper. "Wow!" exclaimed Zandi. Each ant was using its tiny jaws to help carry the grasshopper to their colony, and there were hardworking soldier ants that surrounded the precious meal, while others were clearing the path ahead. Through teamwork, these ants carried their heavy load efficiently and successfully. Zandi gently patted the ground and whispered, "Goodbye, little ants. Safe travels." Zandi now gazed into the colorful sky, and she saw an African fish eagle flying high overhead, holding a snake in its talons. She wondered if the eagle was bringing its food to its mate, who was guarding the big nest on a cliff above the river. But before Zandi could see the female eagle opening her mouth to receive her delicious dinner, she heard her dog Tiger barking. "Woof, woof," barked Tiger. "Where have you been? I've missed you." Zandi smiled, and she realized that just like the eagle, Tiger was a loyal and trustworthy companion. Sending a big kiss to the eagles, Zandi and Tiger ran on. Zandi wasn't far from the village when she heard her grandma Gogo's high-pitched call. So, after safely securing the cattle in the kraal, she skipped to her grandma Gogo's hut for a steaming dish of okra and sadza. Later that night, under a bright moon, the whole family sat around an open fire, and they listened with amazement as Zandi shared about her day on the savannah. When Zandi finished describing her day, Grandma Gogo sighed and lifted up her old bones, leaned on her walking stick. Grandma Gogo looked at Zandi, and in her creaky, whispery voice, she said, "You, Zandi, you have discovered the true meaning of Ubuntu. To achieve Ubuntu, you must be a friend to all. You must protect one another, care for all, work together, contribute to your community, and be willing to try and never give up. Only then can you achieve true happiness in this life." Grandma Gogo blew Zandi a kiss. She smiled, gathered her sleeping mat, and she sauntered contentedly to her sleeping hut. The rest of the service today is going to be about how it is all our job to care for one another. This is the spirit of Ubuntu that we are all part of and contribute to the us of the fellowship and the world. We are all part of the interdependent web, or I am because you are.
This is a reading of Hope and Resilience. Everything is Still on Fire by Therese Soto. Everything is still on fire, despite your best efforts. In addition to living, it is clear that fire or not, you must level up in what it means to thrive. Right now, that means wrestling with the truth in the fact that everything is not your fault. I'm sorry that everything is still on fire. Once hate catches, the winds of not my problem blow, and the blaze is hard to stop. But hard is not impossible. Not yet is different than never. You in community have an answer. You have a response to systems of power and control and to the cost of suffering. You and your community together are the answer. You are not only a people of flame, but also a people of cold, clear truth. You know both where you fall short and where you flourish and where you still reach. Everything is still on fire, but all is not lost. You remain more nimble than steadfast, more unshakable than swayed by the latest rage. You are here to put out the ravenous flames and heal the world. Enough is enough. Good morning, I'm Dana Johnson, and being a Universal Unitarian has given me the freedom to develop deeper beliefs and figure out what works for our family, for me, and our spiritual journey for our connection with each of you at the fellowship. We first entered the fellowship 1 year ago because our friend Amanda Stuck reached out to us and told us about this great big family in our community, waiting to embrace my husband Eric and I. When we arrived, we were greeted by Marie Luna and Tom, of whom I'm sure you are quite familiar. I remember the smiles, the genuineness, the comfort I felt, immediately feeling a sense of home at the fellowship. Week after week, there were new strangers who sought us out at coffee hour, seeking not only to know us, but to provide support, guidance, listening, and healing. I learned very quickly that it was not only Reverend Christina and Reverend Leah that provided a ministry at the fellowship, but each of us. We received text messages, emails, phone calls, and Facebook messages offering support and words of healing when we most needed it. I remember being drawn to tears each and every Sunday because Eric and I had found a family. The fellowship is more than a building, a house of worship, more than a Sunday service. It is the commonality of seeking community, truth, and connection that drew me to our fellowship. For me, it's the connection of warmth I feel each week with all of you. Eric and I, in the past, have experienced disconnection and a sense of hurt, blame, and shame in our religious experiences and houses of worship, caught in the dogma of a single religion. I once believed the flames of hell were my destiny, but now I know that the flame of our chalice is lighting my way, guiding me. This fellowship, you, the community, and our shared experiences have taught me the importance of lay ministry. We are each responsible for the well-being, care, and love of one another. How we might engage in this ministry is unique to each of us and our special gifts. Our gifts can provide healing in the form of greetings, laughter, a holding of hands, a listening ear on the telephone, or a simple instant message of support, expressing courage and hope when we most need it. We all need very different things in our time, and each of us can bring a listening moment that can create healing to others. The healing we bring as an embodiment of a collective fellowship can help us overcome all challenges and that are brought in our path. Perhaps you have a gift to share in this ministry, to show healing in a listening moment and continue to help fuel the flame to burn bright. As a community, we are interdependent, meaning none of us is truly free until we are all free. The fellowship is a bright flame, casting a guiding light to encourage and engage in social justice, in the struggles for equity, liberation, and equality. This tenet is near and dear to my connection to each of you and our world outside. Join me in the stewardship to carry the flame of social justice forward until all are free. For our flame and hope is to humanity itself.
Long ago and far away, I received the gift of ministry from a congregation I served. I once found myself scanning the supply closet for craft project components with a teen I'll call Hannah, a fun and kind person, but with the habit of deflecting any chance of personal revelation with a joke at her own expense. I had given up asking her thoughtful questions, but while we were grabbing glue, magazines, and those creepy googly eyes, I made casual conversation by asking how she was doing. The floodgates opened. She told me about her family post-divorce, a friend's drug problem, and her own self-harm behavior. Instinctively, I turned to face her as a way to honor her with full attention. "Don't look at me," she shrieked. "No eye contact. It's too judgmental." I pivoted to a parallel position, trying to absorb not only her sharing, but also this great lesson that sometimes people need subtlety, even privacy, as they risk showing themselves. Sometimes we need the attention of the spotlight without the harsh light. From this act of ministry, Hannah coaching me to expand the ways I knew how to listen, I now know that the best way to talk about school trouble with my 9-year-old is side by side while we're making omelets. Meaningful fellowship connections happen on the sly too, like before we formally open the agenda at a Zoom committee meeting, when I'm still rustling papers and someone is finishing a cup of tea. The fellowship has also been a place where I have received ministry. In my 2nd year here, I was your only minister when the then senior was on sabbatical during our major building expansion. Dust and grime coated every surface. I will never forget a guest minister cringing upon entering our badly lit, plywood-covered sanctuary. Staff and lay leaders were constantly bombarded with decisions about outlet cover colors and whether we could afford to even build the legacy room. It was a brutal schedule. During this difficult period, a member I'll call Tom invited me to see a band on a Saturday night at a nature center I'd never heard of called Boobolts. "No thanks," I said semi-politely, since apparently he didn't understand that I had to work every single second of every single waking moment. "Are you doing anything to relax and enjoy life?" he asked. The more I thought about it, the more my annoyance faded. I wasn't actually doing anything fun. "No pressure," Tom concluded, "but we'd love to see you if it works out." I put in an appearance. The music was fun and uplifting. I felt myself draw a full breath. A tiny space blossomed. I left early. Sunday morning comes so swiftly for preachers, and stood alone in the cold of the star-lit parking lot. I could see a big patch of darkness that beckoned in the distance, promising extensive walking trails. Eventually, I checked them out, pleased at having been introduced to the place. Fast forward to last March, when school shut down. My family hasn't talked much about this, but my spouse, Amy, was incredibly seriously ill for about 7 weeks, and I was fighting panic about her well-being and my capacity to hold it all together. The first day without school was brutal. I didn't even realize I was murmuring prayers under my breath until the kids kept insisting that I was, in fact, talking to myself. Day 2 was what my children delicately refer to as ass cold. Charming, right? But the second we finished breakfast, I bundled them up and out. I turned up the minivan radio so they wouldn't ask where we were going, and I drove us around aimlessly, trying to collect my thoughts, what to do, where to go. Boobolts. Go there we did, tromping around in the icy woods until the kids were worn out and I was calmer. We've been back countless times, sometimes many times a week, for a quick visit to the pond or longer excursions with water bottles and bug spray. As the weather gradually warmed, peaked, and now still as the temps plummet again. It's been a source of adventure and play for the kids and absolute sanity for me, and for Amy too, once she was able to be out and about. All thanks to Tom's ministry. These are some images I've captured across the months. My second story about ministry you all have treated me to is set 5.5 years ago. Through foster care, Amy and I welcomed 2 children into our family, not knowing that their other 2 siblings would join us a few months later. Well, as soon as folks around here noticed I had children in tow, the fellowship swung into gear. A handful of beautiful meals appeared, staggered to arrive every few days. One included a delicious smoothie and the stunningly successful suggestion that we present it as monster juice to make the spinach color more palatable. It was a challenging period of settling in, but thanks to the ministry of home-cooked meals, we didn't have to fret about dinner. Tiny space. The many forms of the fellowship's ministry that I and others have received. Thanks for that, by the way. They are owned and carried out by all of us. Any among us can reach out to one another. And yet care and connection are the special domain of the care team. In case you haven't encountered these fine folks yet, let me make some introductions, because they and the work they do are the whole point of the service this morning. They represent something special about the fellowship. These people have made the commitment to check in on you and be there for you. They do this on behalf of me and the ministry team, but also on behalf of the whole congregation. Members of the care team apply for this role. They are specially trained in how to offer support for whatever life has thrown in your path, whether it's a joy you're processing, a terrible sorrow, or some other kind of discernment, or trauma, or intense experience. As part of this commitment to continued learning and growth, as responsible, reflective providers of emotional and spiritual care, this year, we, that's the care team, our intern minister Allie Peters, and I, are reading and discussing a book about listening. Here is a little taste.
The Art of Listening in a Healing Way. We listen because we choose to listen, without knowing what will transpire, without needing to know. We listen because the other person is worth being listened to, however little or much we know about them, however much we're alike or unalike. We listen because listening can put us in touch with life and with all that life promises and delivers.
This is the kind of listening that creates what my colleague Marta Valentin talked about in her words that became our call to gather. In this tiny space where I end and you begin, hope lives. Holding that kind of tiny space is the mission and practice of the care team, and it happens when we listen. Listen is a word I used to think of as practical and secular. I still understand and respect those qualities of this important word. But the more I am a minister, and the more I receive ministry from all of you, the more I cannot encounter it without hearing its religious implications. Listen has become part of my vocabulary of reverence, along with words like spirit and God, love and care, ministry and fellowship. The word fellowship is itself a word from Christian theology that liberal Christians use to describe deep companionship that happens among and between equals, or to use the gendered root, between and among fellows. This equality is foundational to Unitarian Universalism. Ours is not a model where ministers with our exclusive pipeline directly to God take pity on lowly lay folk who are but empty vessels waiting to be filled with spiritual knowledge. No way. To us, congregations are where people dwell together in mutual community, each with gifts and needs, each knowing something important. Our theology says that ministry is shared between clergy and lay people. There are practical implications here, and they especially reside in the care team and its role. In Unitarian Universalism, ordination, which is powerful and sacred, does not bestow divinity. It does title ministers. That's why I'm the Reverend Leah Ongiri. My title indicates expertise and authority. I have a terminal degree in my field. It took a decade of love, labor, and learning for me to reach full fellowship with the Unitarian Universalist Association. 98% of fellowship members voted to call me as your associate minister. I am empowered to lead in clearly defined ways. And yet, there is nothing I can do as professional minister that any of you cannot also do for each other as acts of lay ministry. This makes us noteworthy among many other faith traditions. In Unitarian Universalism, lay people, that's you, are allowed to be in the pulpit, regardless too of race, age, gender, and other demographic markers. You can lead worship and preach sermons as a layperson. You can officiate rites of passage, such as child dedications, memorials and funerals, and, if the governing board files the proper paperwork, even legal weddings. When we do a Transylvanian Unitarian communion on Christmas Eve, lay folks sometimes work with the ministers to offer it. Don't get me wrong. I specialize in this stuff and believe I have unique skills and gifts to offer in the arena of professional ministry. But my title and I are not necessary for it to happen. Lay people also set theological agendas. For example, 2 members recently contacted Reverend Christina to ask for explicit acknowledgement of mounting COVID deaths with a moment of silence in worship. In Wisconsin, over 1,500 people have died from COVID and the disastrous way the virus is being allowed to spread. In the US, we have lost over 250,000 lives. Globally, the death toll is well over 1 million. These are all very conservative estimates. And the numbers keep climbing, especially in this country and this state in particular right now. Later in the service, when we have our customary time of silence, let us hold this grave injustice and deep tragedy in our hearts. The invitation to do this comes from the ministry of the lay leaders who initiated this opportunity. There is a term for when people share ministry like this, on equal ground before the ground of all being. Lay ministry. Our care team prefers the less assuming title of care team, rather than lay ministers or even pastoral care, because they want to use the most approachable language possible. They want you to understand that they are available to you. They hope you will make use of them. Please do. Let me know so that I can connect you with a wonderful listening presence. Who couldn't use that every once in a while, especially these days? What the care team does, regardless of what they call themselves, is in fact a ministry. This ministry of listening, of care and connection, of co-creating the tiny spaces that each of us need at one time or another, is available to all of us to both receive and to offer one another. This is what we mean when we say that we are a democratic religion. We share the power. We share the ministry. Thank you for sharing this ministry with me. And amen.
Come and find the quiet center in the crowded life we lead. Find the room for hope to enter. Find the frame where we are free. Clear the chaos and the clutter. Clear our eyes that we can see all the things that really matter. Be at peace and simply be. Silence is a friend who claims us, cools the heat and slows the pace. God it is who speaks and names us, knows our being, touches base, making space within our thinking, lifting shades to show the sun, raising courage when we're shrinking, finding scope for faith begun. In the Spirit, let us travel, open to each other's pain. Let our loves and fears unravel gay. There's a place for deepest dreaming the Spirit's lively singing, there is always room to spare.
Sharing our individual joys and concerns helps us to collectively grow resilience. We invite you now to type into the chat box any personal news you might wish to share with our community so that we can hold space with you as we worship. If you would like to connect further with Reverend Leah or with any member of the care team, please let her know directly. And you can still submit joys and concerns on our website or by emailing Reverend Leah or any member of our staff to be included in our weekly email. At this time, we come to the point in our service when we gather together for a moment of silent meditation. In this silence today, we invite our hearts to honor all of those who have lost their lives to the COVID-19 pandemic. Let us now breathe into this shared silence and then join together in our sung response.
And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found a need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer.
Each week, we take time for generosity, remembering that the acts of giving and receiving are spiritual practices. As always, if you are in need of financial or emotional support, please reach out to any of our ministers, Reverend Christina, Reverend Leah, or Allie, so they can help, including modest financial support through the ministry's discretionary fund. For those of you who are feeling relatively more financial secure, we want to thank you for continuing to give and ask you to keep doing so. There are several ways you can give to the fellowship and many reasons to do so. Here are just a few.
Hi, my name is Cindy Darling, and I'm a member of the Fox Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. One of the reasons that I still love being part of the fellowship, even during the pandemic, is that I love that connection that we still have. Being able to see everybody, you can't hug, but being able to see those smiles and those great faces. So I look forward to continuing to see everybody.
As we come to the end of our service, we will extinguish our chalice flame, even as we still hold its light in our hearts. Please join me. As we extinguish this flame, let us go our ways with hope in our hearts, with our spirits renewed, and with a deeper understanding of life's mystery. Let us carry the light of compassion and commitment to build a better world. After our closing words, there will be small breakout groups for about 15 minutes of conversation and connection. In a moment, we will hear a short postlude song. If you don't want to participate in the small group discussions, then please use that postlude music time to log off and leave this Zoom meeting. If you choose to stay, and I hope that you will, I encourage you to learn each other's names and to pay attention to the timer in the upper corner of your screen so that everyone gets a chance to share. And with that,
in this tiny space where I end and you begin, hope lives. Go in connection to yourself, your community, and your world. Go in peace, knowing we are together, even now, from a distance.